This is the story of Howell and Mary Ann Cobb's two front porches. The Cobbs were amongst the wealthiest and most politically powerful Southerners in the decades before the Civil War. Their two Athens homes still convey hints of the grandeur of those antebellum years, or at least what modern mythology has made of them. Yet their two front porches have very different stories to tell. The first of them, here on this imposing Greek Revival home, is where a young slave girl named Aggie and her family were sold in 1843. The second, several blocks away, is where Major General Howell Cobb was arrested in 1865 for his central role in the creation of the Confederacy and his military leadership during the Civil War. These porches, these houses, these stories remind us that the unseen parts of history are often much more complex than what is readily apparent. Howell and Mary Ann began construction of this house in 1836, on land given to them by Howell's parents as a wedding gift. The young couple intended for this grand structure, with its massive brick walls, white-pillared portico, and raised brick rose gardens, to send a message of prominence and permanence to all who saw it. A recent graduate of the University of Georgia and newly licensed attorney who had already begun a rapid ascent within the Georgia Democratic Party, young Howell possessed the talent, drive, and ambition to aspire to the highest offices in the nation. Within 7 years, he had been elected to Congress. 7 years after that, he was Speaker of the House of Representatives. And 7 years later still, he was Secretary of the Treasury in the administration of President James Buchanan. Yet this house has a different history to tell. The Panic of 1837 ravaged the nation's economy and drove Howell into personal bankruptcy, even as his political fortunes were on the rise. By 1843, unable to hold his creditors at bay any longer, Cobb and his family watched this home and many of their possessions go under the auctioneer's hammer at a court-ordered sale. And so the story of this house is the story of a young slave girl named Aggie, who as part of that sale was forced to stand on this front porch and watch while an auctioneer called out her fate and the fate of her brothers and sisters, and possibly her parents, as potential buyers bid to carry them away to new homes and uncertain futures. Although Howell's personal wealth had been lost, the couple's prenuptial agreement meant that Mary Ann's sizable fortune remained. Within a few years, the family purchased a cottage on nearby Hill Street, then replaced it with a new and larger structure that boldly communicated their continued prominence. Within its walls, the Cobbs and Aggie, and eventually her children, continued to experience joys and sorrows, triumphs and defeats. In that house on Hill Street, the Cobb family and their slaves watched as Civil War ravaged the South and eventually remade the nation and Athens. At the war's end, Major General Howell Cobb was under arrest at the hands of Union authorities, and Aggie Mills was a free woman at last.